Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, where our special guests will be unpacking the immigration aspects of President Trump's executive order on South Africa. Let me start off just by explaining the format of our session. We'll begin with a discussion. Our guests will cover as many of the questions that you've already submitted. We will then move into a Q&A session. Please feel free to post your questions towards the end of the discussion so that we can deal with aspects that we haven't already covered. Let me start by introducing our panel. My name is Kirsten Halker. I am the founder of Immigrate to USA. Having immigrated with my family just short of 3 years ago, we felt like we were navigating a minefield. I created Immigrate to USA as a one-stop resource to offer guidance through every aspect of the relocation process. We have a rigorously curated list of trusted providers, as well as first-hand articles that share practical insights into or from our own journey. And we empower you with the knowledge, tools, and confidence you need for a smooth immigration process. Now I'd like to introduce our two guest speakers. Bernard Wolfsdorf, originally from South Africa. Bernie is the past national president of the 17,000-member American Immigration Lawyers Association. He is the managing partner of WR Immigration, a law firm known worldwide for providing exceptional quality services. With 45 attorneys and approximately 180 staff, their firm provide high-quality global immigration services. Our second guest is Leon Fasveld. Leon is licensed in South Africa, England and Wales, and the United States. Leon serves as the managing partner at the global immigration law firm Fasveld and Hugo. With a distinguished career spanning over 2 decades, Leon has established himself as a trusted advisor for individuals and organizations navigating the complexities of U.S. immigration law through creative immigration solutions. Thank you both for taking the time to assist us with this webinar, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. It really is a pleasure with my colleague and friend, Leon Fasveld. And I see we just went over 501, so you were right. Oh, back to 500, Kirsten. So there we go. I understand we have some load shedding in South Africa. They did that specifically for our presentation tonight, I understand. Pardon my weak sense of humor. Just to point out, number one, this is not legal advice that we are providing today. This is a brand new program, and although we have familiarity with the law of the United States regarding refugee status and asylum status, we must note that at this point, we merely have an announcement from the president together with an executive order. And many of and he's been issuing executive orders literally every day. Some of them are clearly well thought out. This one reflects, President Trump's concerns. We are not getting into the politics of this today. We are lawyers, and we are merely focusing on interpreting the law. If you have questions, you can reach both of us. There's the website, my last name, wolfsdorf.com and fasveld.com. And now let's get started. So, Leon, on February the 10th, 2025, President Trump released this executive order addressing human rights violations in South Africa. And there was perhaps not that much surprise because we've heard comments from President Trump previously on this issue. So tell me, what was your take, and what is your take, Leon, on this order? And please, of course, feel free to introduce yourself first. Thank you, Leon. Your sound is off, sir.
I was just doing a kind of a mimic of how the old Japanese movies that we used to watch. That was, you know.
Come on, Leon, you
Anyway.
didn't know how to use the on-off button, man. You're a South African. Sorry, pardon my
Yeah,
silly sense of humor,
no
but
problem.
I do that all the time.
Wel, goeiemôre. Dit is my voorreg om saam met Bernie so op 'n webinar te klim saam met julle. My naam is Leon Persveld, ek's 'n advokaat in Suid-Afrika voordat ek Amerika het geïmmigreer het en praktiseer nou hierso in Amerika vir die afgelope 24 jaar, waarvan 20 van hierdie jare spesifiek gefokus is op immigrasie. En soos wat Bernie gesê het, ons geselskap hier vandag is meer net gefokus rondom 'n nog 'n opsie wat vorendag gekom het vir Suid-Afrika, 'n immigrasie opsie. En ons wil ons bespreking hou rondom die addisionele opsie wat vir Suid-Afrikaners beskikbaar is vir die Suid-Afrikaners wat belangstel om Amerika toe te immigreer. Now, to Bernie's point, there was an executive order issued, towards the first part of February by the U.S. president. And I think it's kind of come a long way just because, in his first administration, there was already talks a little bit about some of the things South Africa is doing. There was, in fact, a bipartisan bill that was put by Congress before with President Biden last year that didn't get signed. Just because of some concerns that America has with their relationship as it relates to South Africa. So I think that the most recent order, executive order, may have been triggered just by the Appropriation Act that was put into place after President Cyril Ramaphosa congratulated President Trump on him winning the election and moving forward, and then subsequently, I guess, maybe just introducing this bill. That kind of raised some additional concerns with the US government as it relates to the ongoing relationship between these two countries. And as a result, South Africa has done, obviously through this, America has obviously through this executive order, come up with two things that America has basically put on the table. And that is to pull any kind of support that it has, an ongoing relationship, economic relationships with South Africa, and also introduce this potential refugee program.
So, Leon, I want to start off with a comment. And by the way, feel free to put your questions in English or Afrikaans. My Afrikaans is my vrot, maar ek verstaan 'n bietjie. I'm a soutpeel from Durban, so please excuse me. Anyway, so getting into a little bit of legal stuff, typical South African, we like to have a little bit of humor here. We understand, of course, this is a very serious topic, and moving to America, which all three of us have done, is a huge, huge change. We will always be South Africans in our heart. You never lose that when you are born in Africa. We consider ourselves Africans, and I don't make jokes about it, but we are South African Americans. And we respect what you are going through and the challenges that South Africa has at the moment. We're not getting into the politics of this. So the first thing I want to talk about, what exactly is an executive order? Okay, so you have laws, statutes, and there is the I got to remember my years now, I'm getting old. There is the Refugee Act of 1980, which defines the term refugee, defines the word asylee. Executive order is not a law. It's not a statute. It's not a regulation. Basically, what it is an instruction to the executive authorities to come up with a plan. And we all know the South African phrase, maak 'n plan. So this is merely a plan. It is not a regulation. But at the end of the day, it comes from the executive committee, which means that the administration has to come up with something to fit this. But at the same time, or just before announcing this executive order, President Trump issued another executive order literally canceling the refugee program annually, approximately 100,000, but there have been more in some years. Refugees have been processed. They complete a refugee application abroad with a sponsor, and they are applying in South Africa. When they apply in South Africa, that's called refugee. When they apply in the United States, that's called asylum. And right now, the asylum cases are being very rigorously interpreted. But before we get into that, let's deal with some basics. So we pulled out one sentence from this executive order. Will establish a plan Baram, to settle, sorry, my few words, to settle disfavored minorities in South Africa. Well, okay, who are these disfavored minorities in South Africa because of their race? So in order to prove refugee status or asylum, you have to show that there is a well-founded fear of persecution, not just discrimination, but a well-founded fear of persecution based on race, religion, various other circumstances, membership in a particular social group, So, Leon, you're the smarter lawyer here. Do you believe that this covers only Afrikaners? And then please help me, what exactly is an Afrikaner? Because you have mixed families, right? And then you have a couple of us Engelsman who are farmers in my home state, KwaZulu-Natal. Who are these disfavored minorities that might be covered under this executive order, which, as I say, the plan is not baked. It's just come out of the oven. It's not quite ready. So what's your take on this, Leon?
So thank you, Bernie. I think that just to Bernie's point, this is definitely something that is still in the making. And one thing that I would caution everybody listening is that, number one, there is no plan. There is no program, I mean. And so if there is anybody, doesn't matter if it's a lawyer or not, Bernie and myself can tell you unequivocally, as of today, there is no program. So please don't be duped by anybody who wants to take your money and take advantage of you as a South African to utilize a program that does not exist. So I'll start there. Secondly, Bernie and myself is here just merely to provide you advice. This is not necessarily something that we do, generally speaking, as far as refugees are concerned. So the purpose of this is really just to provide you some guidance as to how this program typically works and where things are at. To Bernie's question, he asked, who's going to be included? So when the first executive order did come out, it talked about, and remember, it was kind of on the back of the Expropriation Act 13 of 24, that talked about the ethnic minority Afrikaner agriculture or Boere, right? And so there was immediately some questions as to who these Afrikaner South Africans are. And we all as South Africans know and can somewhat identify who these Afrikaner South Africans are. But as it relates to property being taken, we also know that there's a few English South Africans on the Natal coast who also has farms with the sugar canes and so on and so forth. We also know that there's some other people who are also being discriminated against based upon their race, despite the fact that they may not even be white. So what happened subsequently is the U.S. State Department and the Department of Homeland Security. Those are the two agencies that are tasked by defining and coming up with a plan that Bernie's talking about. And subsequently, through the State Department, the US Embassy came up and actually referred to this executive order and took away the word Afrikaner, South African, and talked about a disfavored minority group. And so a disfavored minority group, I think, is something that will ultimately get defined as we move along and trying to find out exactly who that's going to be. But some other language that I want to capture out of the actual executive order that I think is important for our discussion is also important to note on how this will play into who ultimately will be taking advantage of this refugee program. It does not limit the only those who are being discriminated against because of their land being taken away. In fact, the actual executive order talks about the act follows countless government policies designed to discriminate and dismantle equal opportunity in employment, education, and business. And then it also talks about, obviously, the reappropriation of land. So I think that there's definitely going to be a broader scope of who's being discriminated against and not just those whose land is being taken away. That's the one thing. The other thing, it then also defines in the fact sheet from the US Embassy and taking away the Afrikaner South African and replacing that with a disfavored minority. So then the question then just becomes on how you then qualify yourself as a disfavored minority in South Africa that's being discriminated against their race. One example that we had, I mean, if we refer to from an economic point of view, I mean, I can talk about education in of itself, and maybe I should do that just in of itself. We've represented countless of South Africans in South Africa who graduates top of their class with 9 distinctions and is not able to get into some of the top universities in South Africa only because of their race, who then seek to come to the United States for their kids to come and study over here. This specific act talks about the discrimination as it relates to the equal opportunity for education as well. Let's talk about the Black Economic Empowerment Act. This is something that South Africans have lived under for an extensive period of time. And I can probably list more than 20 of discriminatory acts that is currently on the books in South Africa that I think that one can tie your argument into. So disfavored minorities would kind of fall within a classification that's being discriminated because of those particular.
So Leon, let me jump in a little bit and see. So basically, the way I look at this, and I'm think of Donald Trump, and I think of what Elon Musk is currently doing, the two of them together in America, is getting rid of what we call the DEI programs in America, diversity, equity, inclusion. They don't like this word. They believe it should be merit-based, not based on race or color. America, like South Africa, has a history of, and I'm just going to be mild and say unfairness. America is got a history of slavery, right? So the idea was to overcome past injustice and create these affirmative actions and benefits for certain groups. And President Trump has vigorously banned this from the US government. And perhaps what you're saying is a similar sort of approach to South Africa, but let's stay off the politics of this and let's focus on who's going to benefit. So at this point, your feeling is that this is quite broad and that any group that is a disfavored minority, whether Afrikaans, whether English speaking, whether mixed race, a mixed race farmer, who is subjected to this. Basically, I happen to be Jewish, so is Jewish and now it's religion. Is that a subgroup that could be impacted? There was a case, I haven't followed it carefully. This young guy was selected as captain of the South African under-20 cricket team, and they said, sorry, you know, we can't have a Jewish guy there. Is that some form of discrimination based on a particular religion, for example? How broad do you think this is?
I think it's going to be broad enough when we look at you know, these specific elements that has been touched on as far as the executive order is concerned. But remember, we are still in the exploratory stage of this whole process. This needs to be rolled out by the State Department, and to help us define who these disfavored minorities are, and also help us define as far as the prejudice that there are that they need to claim. Let me just say, you know, historically, from a refugee point of view, there are usually 4 priorities that the State Department is tasked with as far as where people are going to fall under and what type of refugee they're going to be. And so maybe I take maybe just a minute to talk about the refugee. Typically, when we think about a refugee, we think about the guy who comes from a war-torn country and maybe just have the shirt on his back and maybe a toothbrush to go along with it. That is usually the priority number 1, where these cases are usually referred to by the Program of the United Nations, and where there are some of these, you know, war-torn countries where people have actually been displaced from their country where they currently live. I don't believe that this program will fall within that first priority. There is also it's the second priority that I think that we will fall under, and that second priority falls under a group of special humanitarian concern identified by the U.S. Refugee Program. And so I think that that's probably where, if you look at these 4 different priorities, where this South African Refugee Program will fall under. And then from there, you know, the Refugee Program will then actually outline exactly, you know, what the process and protocols are at, and that we can talk about here in a little bit from what we expect that will look like.
So that's really helpful. And so what you're saying is probably what I'm saying. It's too early to sign up these cases right now.
Yes.
But from a realistic point of view, it does make sense to start perhaps preparing documentation. If you lived on a farm, for example, and you have been subjected to various threats, obviously, and I don't think there's too many expropriation orders issued as of this time, but, you know, if your property has been targeted, you raise the interesting thing of, you know, your child is top of their class and applied for a medical school and got rejected. Is that a form of discrimination that might impact it? And the answer is probably relevant. So at this point, we're both on the same level in the sense of being able to document specific things. I don't think, quite personally, that they are going to admit 2 million Southern African refugees under this program. I don't know how many that people will be admitted, whether it's going to be hundreds or whether it's going to be thousands of people. But what I can tell you is that each one will have to have an interview with a USCIS officer. And, you know, there is another blanket situation. We've only seen that once, to my knowledge. There was something called the Lautenberg Amendment. And what the Lautenberg Amendment did is it applied to Jewish people in the Soviet Union. And that was by Congress. Congress defined that group as a persecuted group. I haven't gone back and studied that act of Parliament, but basically the only thing you had to prove in those days was, number one, that you were Jewish and that you were a member of the Soviet Union, and that entitled you to be processed as a refugee and come to America. And fairly large numbers of Jewish Soviet citizens were able to finally leave. So we don't know if it's going to be that broad. I don't think it's going to be that broad, because this is not based on statute, as we've said. It's based more on the individual circumstances. So Leon, every day you and I help South Africans put cases together, and we provide long checklists of documents for South Africans. But at this point, we're not able to provide this checklist, right? But we can still give some guidance to people in terms of documents. Do you have any practical advice for us on the application process, preparing documents, estimated processing times and things like that? By the way, my experience is most refugee cases take about 2 years to process. And one of the things I say is, please don't pack your bags, don't sell your property,
That's right.
don't liquidate your assets until you literally have the refugee visa package in your hand. And then one of the things I just have to personally mention is that once you have been granted refugee status based on your fear of persecution and discrimination, usually discrimination alone is not enough. We need persecution, but discrimination can become persecution. And then you have to have a well-founded fear that if you are returned to that home country, so you can't go back home. People need to understand this is not a regular green card. And it's true. With a refugee, you have to wait 1 year and then apply for a green card. If you're on asylee in the US, you can apply for a green card straight away. But if you get your green card through refugee or asylum, and you know your grandfather or grandma pass away, I say that because I'm an I'm an old guy. And Opa, damn it, my Afrikaans is bloody frot. I warned you, I'm an Opa, not an That sounds like Oompa Loompa. I'm one of those too. But the point is that, you know, you can't go back. I'm joking about it, but, you know, you won't be able to return until at best you are a U.S. citizen. So, you know, that's many, many years down the road. And even then, you know, you said I was scared to go back. So I do point out that this is a very big step, cutting off your links to your home country, to your family, to your Opa and Oma. This is a huge, big thing, and people need to be very careful. Thank you, Leon, for giving that word of advice. Please don't be fast in signing up with some of those 17,000 immigration lawyers in the US anxious to sign up clients, or even people in South Africa signing up clients. It's a little bit too early. And your guidance on this, sir?
Thank you, Bernie. I have just put in the chat kind of a quick link to our website from what we've gained from previous refugee programs and what that process typically looks like. So let me just quickly, on a kind of a helicopter view, talk about how this is going to work, right? So once the Department of Homeland Security and the State Department's got their ducks in a row, they're going to set up a refugee program, settlement support center over there at the in South Africa. So just to Bernie's earlier point, refugee status can only be gained from South Africa. You cannot do refugee status in the United States. So I'll just clarify that. And so through that refugee support center, they're going to do some pre-screening, do maybe an education process of what this all entails, educate you about the process, and they can create a file and maybe start preparing with a form. I believe it's the I-590, if I recall correctly.
Correct.
Maybe do some initial biometrics and just kind of check you out. So this is just kind of a pre-screen, talk to you about it, what it is, educate you right out of their mouth, not my mouth or Bernie's mouth or anybody else. And that's all free. So this program is free. Should be able to enroll once this all rolls out. Bernie and myself and some of our other colleagues will kind of give you some links of where to go and register and make sure that you do so directly with them. And then after that, once they are done, they will probably move this thing over to USCIS for adjudication. I think that during that point in time, there will be some additional background checks done through this process. There will be an interview conducted, and this is where you really need to come and make your case as far as the persecution is concerned. You need to have your documents ready as far as the meat of this case is concerned. I think that what is important here is this is not the time where you need to make up or fabricate things. You just need to be honest. If you lie or you give misinformation, it creates a total different inadmissibility to the United States that may have you or your family never see America again. So I want to implore upon you that when you go through this process, to be as brutally honest as you can. One of the things that I oftentimes find with South Africans, and when we talk about criminal history, they will tell me that their criminal matter has been expunged. I said, well, that's great, but it doesn't circumvent the question when the immigration officer asks you, have you ever been arrested? That answer will always be yes, irrespective of if your criminal record has been expunged. Because if you say no, and you think that your criminal record was expunged and they later find out, that is material misrepresentation that may otherwise either revoke the benefit that you got and or obviously deny the benefit that you are seeking. So I implore upon you to be honest and be truthful. So as they go through this interview, they will make a determination at that point in time to determine whether or not they're going to move you on to the next final step. And again, there will be some extensive background checks done at that point in time. I believe that from there on forward, once they have that done, they will send you to a support center that will do some medicals, and that medical is really just it's an immigration medical that determines whether or not you've got all of your immigration medicals done. These are just your vaccinations that you got when you were a child, and they may do some TB tests and some other tests as far as that's concerned. It's very consistent with what they do in any event for people immigrating permanently to the United States. At that time, they'll also maybe do like a cultural orientation to expect what it's like to come to America. It's not always what you see on TV. And they may then also talk about what it takes then from there to travel across. A lot of people have asked me, so is the government going to pay for my plane ticket for me and my dog and everybody that's applied for and approved for this application? The short answer is that yes, they may give you a loan. They're not gonna, and they would expect you to pay it back. But otherwise, it's still on your dime to pay for this plane ticket to fly over to the United States. Just stepping one step back, the people who are included in this application would be the principal applicant, his spouse, and kids under 21. If you have a child that goes over the age of 21, he or she would need to apply independent from the rest of the family unit and make out his or her own case as far as that's concerned. Once you do get to the United States, you will get in contact with Customs and Border Protection. At CBP, they will do another little a quick check and a background check on you and make sure that everything is good. And then from there, now that you're in the United States, they will then send you to the various different settlement, refugee settlement places that has been allocated across the state. So let's say, for instance, you are allocated to be sent to Missouri. There will be a refugee center there. Typically, I mean, these are just, I'm not saying this is exactly how it's going to work out. This is typically how it works. You'll come to Missouri. From there, they will give you probably about a 60 or 90-day window to kind of get acclimated. They'll get you housing and, get you the basic benefits, medicals and stuff like that. And it is all set up only so that you can kind of get on your feet and then get going. This is not a welfare program that you're going to rely upon for the entire time that you're going to be here. And then one thing I would also just mention, I think, to what Bernie's point is that from all immigration options that you can pick, with this now being a possible extra one for South Africans, it is vitally important that before you consider this, two things I would say is, aside from the fact you cannot return to South Africa without jeopardizing your refugee status and coming back again, the other thing that I would also caution is that once you do come to the United States and you do get on your feet, this is it's a pretty tough journey for elderly people to come to the United States because of healthcare. Now, I'm sure that the government will probably to some degree provide some some Medicaid. This is all details that will come in and flow in as this program evolves. But I think that as you're considering this program, especially for those who are on pension, where money may not take you as far as what it would have in South Africa, to talk to someone like Kirsten and her team, and understanding what the pension transfer is going to look like, how much money you're going to be able to get over here, for you to understand where you ultimately want to end up in the United States. You may end up thinking that it's great to go to California, but that's very expensive sunshine to buy. Whereas if you come to the Midwest, it's maybe a little bit more affordable as you get on your feet. Once the government do settle you in a state like Missouri, or let's say Texas, or whatever the case may be, it's not required that you stay there, right? I mean, again, they are just kind of placing you somewhere to get you on your feet, and then you're good to go. 1 year later, or within 1 year, you are then required to apply for permanent residency. This is green card. And then once you have your green card, there's a whole process that evolves as far as that's concerned. You need to qualify for that again. And once you have permanent residency, 5 years later, you'll become a citizen. I think that kind of gives a little bit of an overview of what we at least expect on how the thing will roll out. Bernie, did I miss anything?
No, that's really helpful, Leon. Thank you for going through those steps. Kirsten, I have a question for you that came out of what Leon said. And that is because one of the areas that you help people with or specialize in, I understand, is helping people formally emigrate from South Africa. What is that process, by the way, or as we say in America, process? What is the process to formally immigrate from South Africa? How long does that take? And can you give us some handy tips on that one too, please?
So, well, I don't believe there's a formal process of immigrating. There is what was previously known as financial immigration, which isn't really what it used to be. But we work with a panel of consultants who assist families move their finances across and deal with their taxes both here in the US and in South Africa to make sure that they're compliant on both sides. So yes, that process is covered by some of the service providers that we work with and partner to assist South Africans who have made the move.
So that's really helpful. But I think people, elderly people moving over, they may have an estate plan, they may have assets abroad. They have to deal with all of those things. It's not just, pick up your things and leave. Vat jou goede en trek. How's my Afrikaans doing, Leon?
I like it.
Yeah.
Cup and flow with me.
But, sorry, can't believe my mistakes. But the point of the matter is that there is an extensive planning process here. Now, one of the things I want to go back to is what I would call nitty gritty of things you can do right now. So, documentation.
Yes.
If you mentioned the form I-590. I have experience with that. You can, we could even provide a link to it and fill out the form. But it's very important to include your personal statement. What are these things that happen to you specifically? I mean, we can go into so-called general, and there would obviously, when we submit this, be a package explaining the general discrimination or things that have happened to you. But I would strongly recommend that if your farm was attacked, that you have the police report, you have the details, your own personal statement, news reports. Like, let's suppose you come from a particular area that's been hit on many occasions, such that, you live in fear of being attacked. There have been some gruesome cases, which I think is what got President Trump's attention. Do you have any tips on this one, Leon, with regard to putting your actual documents? Because there's nothing. I'm not formally signing cases at this point, but I think we can actually advise people on, like getting a police report. A police certificate still takes months and months. getting a police report from incidents that have happened. It seems to me those would be useful documents. Or your rejection letter. You know, you mentioned this good one. You came top of your class and then you got rejected. I never came top of my class, so I didn't have that problem. But maybe
I doubt that, Bernie.
Yeah, no, I didn't. It was the girls who studied hard. We were jawling too much. But the girls came top of my class.
That's right.
So back to you, Leon.
Yeah. So thank you, Bernie. I think that, here's just a couple of things that I think you can just get right off the bat. An unabridged birth certificate, right? That kind of takes a while. In South Africa, it's one of those things that doesn't seem to come out pretty easily and quickly. An unabridged birth certificate, an unabridged marriage certificate. If you've been divorced before, go get a copy of that divorce decree, right? Let's see, military. For those of you who have served in the military, go get a letter from the military that says that you were that jy ontslaan was van die weermag. Let's see, certified police clearances. So you can apply for a police clearance. I don't know how long that's going to be valid for. I think the police clearance length is now being long, but at least we'll see what pops out on those police clearances, so you can go get that. And then certified copies, if there is something that pops up, certified copies of your police records. So let's say, for instance, we had one case here. A lady walked out of Clicks a long time ago with some lipstick in her handbag. Okay. And she was charged with theft, even though it was a petty theft. And ultimately, we had some issues when we came to the consulate, because theft, believe it or not, is one of those high-ranking things that will make you inadmissible to the United States. We had to file a waiver. It was an easy waiver to file because of the petty theft exception. But these are some stuff that we can kind of get ahead of, as you start gathering this information and or trying to analyze as to whether or not there may be some naughty stuff that you've done in the past that may make you otherwise inadmissible to the United States. So these are just some easy stuff that I will get these original documents, start making a folder. But then, to Bernie's point, building your specific case, you're going to need to come up with a story, a narrative. And then from that narrative, you're going to need to have some supporting documents that kind of lays out and supports your fear of persecution and the discrimination of things. And so, one person's case may be stronger than the other person's case. We are not the tier of fact, but I think ultimately, once we get some definite guidance, we'll be able to find out exactly who's probably going to fit within that pigeonhole that they're going to create for us as we go through things.
Leon, this is incredibly helpful. There's also a process where you have to have a sponsor in the US. One of the things that I'm thinking about, there's not too many organizations of South Africans, but I hope that those, you've already immigrated quite a few South Africans, so have I. Many of those have been high net worth. Hopefully the South Africans will start getting together. Like this happened with the Ukrainians, right? Sponsor a Ukrainian, and you had to register as a sponsor, fill out certain forms. So I'm hoping that the South Africans on this side who've already made it, or maybe I don't want to refer to the famous South African who's going to help sponsor, but that will be a requirement to obtain a sponsor. And maybe that's something you and I, Leon, can put our heads together and see how we can link up with Kirsten to help in that regard. So I just recognizing all of your time, folks. I want to, am I going the wrong way? Yeah, probably. I normally drive up the wrong way on the road. So we've already covered some of these, but let's talk a little bit about the asylum process. Now, there are literally millions. I think the number is 1.6 million, but it may be more, of people who've come to America, let their tourist visa expire, or in some cases just throw themselves at the border and apply for asylum in the United States. Now, that is a different process. You do not have valid status. So if you're on an F1 student visa, for example, I strongly recommend you stay on your F1 student status, because if you apply for asylum, number one, and you don't have status, you can be detained. And I'm talking about put in prison. All right. So, and right now, the US government is strongly looking for candidates because contrary to popular belief, the president with the highest deportation numbers in the last 10 years is President Biden.
Obama.
Obama's got the record over the past 20 years. He did double the number of people that Trump. So President Trump is out to show that he's tough on immigration. I'm not getting into the politics of it. Some people feel that the immigration system has been too easy. Some people have taken advantage of the immigration system. There has been a generous admission of people from South America, Venezuela, Cuba, Haiti, and other countries, which President Trump is canceling. But let's go back to this fundamental point. Leon, there's a lot of young South Africans in America right now on H-2A agricultural. We know very well that these young South Africans are damn good farmers, damn hard-working people, good, reliable people. They actually have a really good name. Are you recommending to these H-2As to file for asylum right now, or just go out of status and apply for asylum? Or are you recommending that they keep their non-immigrant status so they don't get arrested and or present weak cases and end up in front of an immigration judge or deportation? Because with asylum, you have two steps. Number one, affirmative asylum. And if you are in valid status and the asylum is denied, you are not put into deportation. So, I'm very hesitant to file for asylum. There are some cases going in. I've heard some horror stories of things not going very well. The mood right now with asylum officers is you better have a strong case. But we just honestly don't know. I normally won't touch an asylum case in the United States unless there is clear evidence of a fear of persecution if the person is returning on account of it's usually on political grounds. This is not a political situation. This is one based on discrimination and being a member of a minority that is being picked on. You need evidence when you go to that interview, or you're going to get denied and sent to an immigration judge, or worse still, put in detention to discourage people because you get caught up in this whole tightening up of immigration. So any handy tips for us on this topic, Leon?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. For those who are in the United States on H-2As, we represent quite a lot of these farm boys here in the United States. The farmers loves them. And I would encourage you to stay the path. Most of you, we have applied for a labor certification. We're in line, a very long line, to get to the front of the line to ultimately get your green card through that process with the farmer. But I would definitely encourage you to stay on any non-immigrant visa status, because as Bernie says, this is kind of your last and final option. If this is the only option that you have available, we need to explore and see what that option pertains to. But don't go switch from something that's working now to an asylum case. So on a case-by-case basis, we'll look at these kind of stuff. But I couldn't agree with you more. I don't think that we're at a point where we need to go just file a whole bunch of asylum.
So Leon, what you're saying right now is if you have somebody on an H-2A and the employer has filed an EB-3 employment-based third pref, which means they'll probably get their green card in maybe about 3 years, maybe a little bit longer. And then once they've got their green card, after 5 years, they can become an American citizen. And then they can petition for their parents, right? Without going through this. And you do this literally every day for a living, right? This is what you do. Yeah. Most of what we do is help people with employment-based, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, family-based. Both Leon and I do investment-based immigration. So we want to talk to you and explain that there are numerous options. One of the options that South Africans don't take advantage of enough is if you have a matric or 2 years of sophisticated work experience, you can apply for this green card lottery. And that thing has like 100,000 winners. I mean, Nigeria every year gets more winners than South Africa. I don't know why the South Africans don't do this. It's free. Travel.state.gov, travel.state.gov, but that's in October. So all of you, Leon, I've honestly immigrated hundreds of South Africans through the green card lottery program, but be careful of scams because there's a lot of scammers in that area. What's your guidance on this employment, family, and investment immigration versus refugee and asylum?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as we from the outset talked about the variety of options, with refugee just being one of them, the typical ones that we handle are a South African who has a company in South Africa, who wants to open up a branch, affiliate, or subsidiary over here. And we do an intercompany transfer. We set up a branch for you in the United States. If you've been an executive or manager at your South African company for more than 1 year, then you could conceivably move to the United States and come serve as an executive here in your new US company. So these intercompany transfer visas is one that we do quite a lot of. The other ones that we oftentimes find is people who are high net worth investors who wants to invest in the United States. And this is from zero to hero. This is like from cricket. It's not ones and twos and hitting fours. This is hitting a six all day long, because you file one application, do an investment of $800,000, and you immediately get a green card for you, your spouse, and kids under 21. And then obviously we represent some athletes and artists that oftentimes come over on the O visa or the EB1A category. So we've represented some people to come to the United States on that category. And then last but not least, I think from the employment side, we've also found that there are some South Africans who have more than one passport, not just a South African passport. And I'm not talking about you having a British passport, but there are some South Africans who do have other passports, and those passports may lend itself to coming to the United States under the E2 treaty visa, which is an investment visa, not a green card, that allows you to come and open up your mom and pop shop over here and come to the United States, where you and your spouse can work. The spouse who's not the principal applicant can work anywhere, and you can then work and get your company up and going. It doesn't lead to a green card. There's some mechanisms for it to go to a green card, but the E2 visa is sometimes a way around things in order to come to the United States. And last but not least, I would say that there are employers in the United States that see the benefit of hardworking South Africans, and they then instigate a process where we go through either an H-1B process to get skilled labor over here, specialty occupation visas over here, and or those who want to apply for green cards, where they go on this long journey to come over here on the second, third, or other preference categories to stand in line to get green cards.
That's excellent advice, Leon, because that's where I'm at exactly. By the way, the H-1B lottery opens on March the 7th, very soon. So let's assume I'm not ready to sell you a refugee package. I'm not ready to sell you an asylum package unless you have very good evidence yet. But I am ready to sell you an H-1B package, or like Leon, an L1 package. We're actually competitors. Leon and me, no, we're not really competitors. It's a big pond. We're friendly competitors. We call each other occasionally for advice when we get stuck. It's about working together. South Africans need to work together and stick together to help each other through the process. And Leon is very experienced in a lot of areas. Both of us actually do a lot of these EB5 cases, but of course that's only 0.01% maybe of the population can afford 800,000. That's what 20 million rand or something. It's crazy. But the good point about just talking about EB5 is that if you do it correctly and you invest your money, there's a good chance you get your money back. You won't make money out of it. But if you invest this kind of money and get your money back, that's not a bad deal at all. It's a job creation program, but we've had a lot of success with this EB5. But if you don't have that kind of money, which of course is almost everybody, then I always like to look at the employment options. And Leon went through a lot of them. I'm emphasizing the H-1B again, because let's suppose you're a CPA in South Africa. The South African CPAs are very popular. We're not hiring lawyers right now, but sometimes we are. And and you file a H-1B and they come over on the H-1B program. Leon spoke about the L-1 program where you open up a branch office. I always caution against the little one, the small companies, because if you don't have numerous layers of employees or highly specialized employees, like in the consulting industry, you can have a problem getting your extension on the L1. So I'm very conservative on the L1s because you need to have numerous employees. That's not so easy. Leon spoke about the O1. I like the O1 a lot. That's for the extraordinary ability. So many people, extraordinary ability, art, science, business, education, or athletics. There's lots of South Africans who are talented in the sports, O1. And then Leon spoke about the E2, and he pointed very briefly to the problem with the British. Again, I'm from Durban. We don't have anything against the British, but the treaty is a little weird because you have to be an inhabitant of the UK. So I have to send you off to live in England or the UK for probably 8 to 10 months at least to have establish a residence there, and then you can do the E2 visa. Normally it's about 150 to 200,000, so you don't have this large sum to spend. So look at, it's like playing with cards. You don't want to play with half the deck. You need your 52 cards and your 2 aces up your sleeve. No, you put the aces on the floor. So the bottom line is most South Africans, young South Africans, they come over on study visas. But Leon, here's the thing, man. To study in America is bloody expensive, right? I mean, as a foreign student, you're paying very expensive rates that, quite frankly, most South Africans can't afford to spend, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year to attend school or university in America. But yet there are a large number. And then incident to their student status, they can get work permits, optional practical training, STEM practical training, move the H1. That's the more regular way that people immigrate. So we wanted to end our formal presentation, and I'm just looking at the time. We've got about 30 minutes for questions, and I'm sure there's, from what I can see, a hell of a lot of questions. We will probably do a follow-up to this maybe in the next few weeks as we get more information. At this point, we are both, you can see Leon and I, quite conservative on formally applying for refugee, very conservative on applying for asylum, but really gung-ho and active on all the other visa options which South Africans have, whether employment, family-based. By the way, there's one that I need to throw away quickly. Everybody tells me I've got a brother who's an American citizen. Leon, trick question. How long is the waiting line if I have a brother or sister who is a U.S. citizen, wants to file for me?
And will you take? And
no, you don't have to look at the visa bulletin. You have to guess from a wild one. But you don't sign those. I don't sign those cases because I don't know if I'm going to live long enough. It's about 20 years. A 20-year wait, and you can sign with Leon on those because he's a young man, but you can't sign with me because I am not signing 20-year waiting line. But right. I'm not saying don't file it, but if you do file it, just anticipate that family category is no good. But quite a lot of young South Africans come over, they fall in love. If it's a genuine family relationship, lots of good-looking South Africans come over and meet people and get married, but it has to be a good faith relationship. Yes. So we both see those cases. We both handle those cases. So
I can maybe just to that point, Bernie, maybe just tie in, because one of the things that we forgot, but you tie into that, you oftentimes find where you send the child over here to come and study, and that child then marries a U.S. citizen. Now, with everybody waiting 5 years on a green card to become a citizen, once they have their green card, if you're married to a U.S. citizen, you only wait 3 years. And so ultimately, when that child that you've sent and spent all of your money in to send her or him to come to the United States to study, when that child becomes a U.S. citizen, that child can sponsor mom and dad, and it is not a preference category, and it goes relatively quickly as far as getting that green card approved for mom and dad to come on over, if that's the case. Now, we find that that's oftentimes happen. Why? Because Oma and Opa does not want to sit in South Africa while their child is in the United States and they are now building a family over there. But those family preferences are definitely some that takes very long, like you pointed out, brothers and sisters. But there's also green cards available for other family members, children of U.S. citizens, children of permanent residents, spouses of permanent residents, and so on and so forth.
But most of those waiting lines are very long unless
Yeah.
you marry an American citizen or you're the parent of an American citizen. I think the one exception you made is when you marry a permanent resident, but even there, the waiting line is 3 or 4 years. Leon, I want to touch on something a little bit tricky that South Africans need to be aware of.
Yeah.
If I come to the United States, let's suppose I am, I'll get it right now, the OPA, from South Africa, and I come over on a tourist visa with a plan to stay. So I come in on my tourist visa and they say, what's the purpose of your visit? And you say, oh, yeah, look, my son just became an American citizen. I'm going to apply for a green card because I want to live in America. I always tell the truth. And you give the story upon entry to the U.S. What is likely to happen to you if you are tell the truth? And what is likely to happen if you are caught lying on this? So they basically want you to apply for a green card in South Africa, but a lot of South Africans, they come in on a tourist visa. They say, oh, I'm just coming on holiday, and then they change their mind. Help us through this because it's somewhat of a tricky situation, advising people who have an intent to stay. That can be tricky, right?
Yeah, correct. It could most definitely backfire. When you have a tourist visa or non-immigrant visa, this is even a student visa. You have to have an intent to return to your country where you're coming from, and that intent would be either questioned at the port of entry, and even if you don't have, and even if you're not questioned, there is a rebuttable presumption that you do have a non-immigrant intent. In other words, an intent to return within the time frame that you said you will return, or before your allowed status tells you to return. Now, the only time that changes is if there enough time has passed once you've entered the country, and it's usually 90 days or more, for you to then overcome that rebuttable presumption. Remember, the presumption can only be refuted after that time, where you then need to show definitive facts as to what your intent was when you came in and how that subsequently changed. But yeah, do not come in here with the ship container coming in, maybe ahead of you or along with you, and having your dog and everybody else, because the guy at the border patrol, even though it sounds like he may be the only guy doing an interview, he's with Customs and Border Protection, who's also the guys inspecting your cargo that's coming in. So that conflicting information could obviously create big
really good
if you lie.
Really good advice, Leon, because we have this happen all the time. South Africans come in on a tourist visa, and then they get married after 1 week to a U.S. citizen, and then they call you and they say, oh, I just got married. Can you apply for a green card? And we've got potentially visa fraud on our hands, which is, and as Leon said, there's a presumption of immigrant intent. Okay, so if you come over on a tourist visa, it's not complicated, folks. If you come on over on a tourist visa, you have to be a tourist. If you come on a student visa, you have to be a student. The only exception is the H1 and the L1A, right, Leon, which is dual intent. On those visas, you can say, yeah, I want to come and work temporarily, can pronounce that word, and then, and I'm emphasizing the word temporarily, you want to come and work temporarily, and then something happens after you enter that changes your mind. And that could be as simple as you meet the person you love and get married, as long as you didn't have that intention. Or it could be your employer saying, hey, look, you're a really good worker. I think we want you to stay. And then they file a green card for you. So just remember to please follow the rules, everybody. Most of us South Africans are quite good at that. We know how to follow the rules. But there are lots of rules in America about, don't come and work illegally. I mean, a lot of South Africans coming on tourist visas, working illegally. If you get caught, then you can be banned from pursuing the regular status. Leon spoke about criminal convictions. Please be careful. Don't break the law. Anyway, enough preaching. We wanted to give you some advice. And just to summarize, it looks like there will be benefits for people applying in South Africa if they have a good case. It looks like there might be benefits for people in the US based on the guidance we get, but we don't have it yet. We expect to see it soon, and we'll do another webinar with you folks to update you. But in the meantime, I'm focusing on these current options because the door is open on those, and the refugee thing is going to work, but it's not going to work for everybody. So you need to have, it's kind of like buying a pair of shoes. You've got to have your size, your style, something that fits you. That's a strange analogy, pair of shoes, but I am strange. So, the point is you need to have a plan that exactly meets your needs. And of course, if you're a farm worker who's been the victim of attacks, that seems to be, or victim of potential expropriation, those seem to be the exact category that people are focusing on in terms of refugee benefits. I personally don't believe they're going to issue refugee status to hundreds of thousands of South Africans. Many are already celebrating. I think it's a little bit too early to celebrate, but perhaps we should use this last period of time to go through the questions, unless, Kirsten, you have something to add to this presentation.
I think we can move. There's some questions that have come up that we can answer.
Are you in the Q&A, or are we in the? We have 160.
We're in the Q&A. I have one here. If I apply for refugee status and I'm declined, will it affect my B1, B2s going forward?
Leon, you want to take that, sir?
I think so. I think that, obviously there is some kind of an application made, which this is at least to an immigrant visa, where there's an implication that you have applied to permanently come to the United States. How are you going to convince that immigration officer or the consular officer that, no, never mind that, I was just kidding, I actually just want to go visit, so you need to convince that guy on a tourist visa 5 reasons as to why you're coming back, and just maybe 1 reason as to why you're going. So that may count against you. What do you think, Bernie?
I'm going tougher than you on that one. I'm going to be the Arakat approach. Trying to use the few words of Afrikaans I know. So, but here's the bottom line. They always ask what comes first, the cart or the horse. It's always the horse. Okay, so what I mean by that is the non-immigrant visa comes first. Okay, yeah. So if you express immigrant intent by filing refugee or filing green card, then you're almost certainly going to get rejected on your tourist visa or student visa. So always put the horse in front of the cart. If you want to study in the US, that's a student visa. You want to come and visit Mickey Mouse, that's a tourist visa. Those are legitimate reasons to come to Disneyland. If you're young and you haven't been to Disneyland, we've got 2 or 3 of them, one in Florida, one here in Southern California. So, yeah, always non-immigrant visa first, and then followed by, and the only exceptions, the H and the L, the worker visa and the transfer visa, and to some degree the O1 as well. But if you filed for a green card, now I think lottery is an exception, because lottery is such a long shot. I don't think they're going to deny you a tourist visa or student visa merely because you applied for the lottery. But, you need to be ready to explain, the only reason I applied for the lottery was this Duas, Bernie Wolfsdorf, said that it shouldn't affect my tourist. No, don't say that. But calling myself a Duas. That's what my teachers used to call me. So no, I'm making bad jokes here. But the point of the matter is, I want to emphasize this point. I've encouraged people to do the lottery, but actually lottery is an immigrant petition. So, but I don't think they're going to deny you because, literally it's not even 1% chance of success. I have a client the other day who was quite funny. He said, oh, I apply for all those lotteries. I do the Kellogg's lottery. I do the Quaker Oats lottery, and I always buy lottery tickets. So I thought I'd buy one too. I thought, well, that's kind of funny, but quite good advice, actually, quite a smart. South Africans tend to be smart and creative from time to time. Back to you, Kirsten, for more questions.
Okay, so there's two that I think are great questions. The one is wait, let me find that one. If I'm approved as a refugee, what is the restrictions on traveling back to South Africa?
Yeah, I think we hit that one. Is that if you are approved as a refugee because you are afraid that you're being persecuted and then you go back to South Africa, that would basically pull the rug from under your feet. And I would expect when you try to come back to the US, you might find that they would refuse. And that's even if it was an emergency situation. So please understand, you're cutting the cord here with a refugee application. So they may make an exception. I've just never seen it before. So please understand, refugee status means you can't return to South Africa at least until you become an American citizen, and that would be 6-7 years. And then you still have to explain why you no longer have the fear, because then the question is, were you hiding this all along? So please think this through very carefully. And that's the main reason Leon and I have been focusing on these alternatives, because in some ways they're less extreme, but the truth is not everybody can fit into one of these little boxes. Not everybody has 800,000 to do EB5. In fact, very few can afford it nowadays, of course.
Okay, thanks, Bernie. And the other question is for South Africans that are sitting in other countries, immigrated to the UK, sitting in Canada.
I'm going to take that one as well. And I actually know the regulatory site. It's 8 CFR 208.14 is the regulation. You can look at the regulations on asylum. 8 Code of Federal Regulations 208. Refugee is 8 CFR 207. Just in case we have any lawyers here, you can put that in your Google search engine and you'll learn what the definition of refugee and the definition of asylee. And in the asylum law, it says that if you go to a third country, you are expected to apply for refugee status there. However, if it's a country that doesn't give refugee status, then you could be excused. But if you are firmly resettled, let's assume you have a Dutch passport or a German passport and you're living in Germany or the Netherlands, forget about it. That's one word, by the way, in America, forget about it. One word. You're kind of firmly resettled in those countries, so Canada. So you've got sort of one shot, as it were. And for people who are in those other countries, you'll have to explain why you didn't apply for refugee status there. Refugees cannot pick and choose. And if they already are firmly resettled, even to the point of transit, if somebody said to me, I have a great asylum case, I'm not encouraging anybody to come on a tourist visa. I will never do that. That's breaking the law. But there are people who do that against my advice and apply for asylum. They don't have underlying status. They could get arrested. But it would be advisable to fly directly to America. If you've got a British passport and that's going to pretty much disqualify you. They're going to say, why don't you just go live in England? So be careful of that. Great question, Kirsten. Firm resettlement. 8 CFR 208.14. Gosh, that makes me sound smart, which I'm not.
You've answered the question around whether or not it's a good idea to go back to South Africa. But that goes hand in hand with we're getting asked, will I lose my citizenship, my South African citizenship?
If you apply for refugee status.
Yeah.
Well, you know, in some ways, applying for refugee status is kind of renouncing. I do fear that South Africa the government might retaliate against this group to try and discourage them. But I think to deny a passport to a South African citizen born in South Africa seems to me to be a violation of international law. I would anticipate or hope that the Constitutional Court would uphold the right of South Africans born. Leon, do you have an opinion on this one, sir?
Yeah, I think it may just be a retaliatory thing from the South African government, if anything else. But other than that, I agree with you. You know, if this follows the normal process, then you once you become a citizen currently of the United States, there's a process and protocol that you need to go through with the South African government if you want to keep your South African citizenship when you apply for American citizenship. So that may change, but it would be from the South African government's point of view as to whether or not you can do that.
Let's hope that they do not retaliate by punishing South Africans and try and strip them of their right as South African born. And by the way, for those of you applying for citizenship, Leon just shared a really handy little tip because a lot of South Africans don't know about it. I understand that the Constitutional Court has said that you're entitled to have, but as a practical matter, you're going to have a problem renewing your SA passport presently if you don't have this permission. And I'm talking now about dual citizenship. Before, everybody's like, oh, I don't need a lawyer, I'm just going to file for citizenship. And then they fail to do this, and then they find they lost their South African passport. So that's good advice, Leon. Next question, Kirsten.
A lot of individuals are already in the process, whether it be EB3s, family. They're saying, should we file to be refugees as well, or should we abandon our current processes? Can you just add?
I'm going to take that one in the interest of speed, and using my silly analogies. You know, I could never get a date on Saturday night, so I had to call 3 or 4 people. Stop that, Bernie. But the point of the matter is always take multiple approach, okay? For me to get a date, Leon's good looking, so he only has to call one person. But for me, I have to call for. So the point that I'm making is apply for the lottery, apply for EB3. Maybe you're eligible for refugee. Gosh, anything else. There's no restriction other than what Leon explained about non-immigrant intent. So oil and water don't mix well. Non-immigrant visas don't mix well with immigrant visas, except for the H and L, maybe the O and E to some degree. So this is kind of complicated, but, you know, take more than one. You need to look at a complete approach, numerous different options at the same time. You know, I go to the restaurant and I can't make up my mind at the menu, so I order steak, fish, and lamb chops, and then I can't eat it all. But stop that, Bernie. But the point is, you want to have a look at the full menu is my advice. Sometimes with the help of an expert like Leon or lesser so myself, we can guide you as to the best option, because very often there's no right or wrong option. And I like looking at multiple, but you know, the thing with ordering the steak and lobster and whatever is it's expensive, right? So you want to narrow it down to the best option based on fees sometimes.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Bernie. I agree with that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, Leon.
Thank you, Leon. Thank you, Bernie. We'll do a follow-up session in the next few weeks. So just keep you're all subscribed, and we'll send a recording to anyone who wants the full recording. But thank you to everyone for
share the good news to everybody with your friends and family, and we hope that we can help some of you on this long journey. So thank you, everybody, and wishing you good night. Sleep well.
Thank you.
For those of you.
Bernie.
Bye, Dunky.
Yes, bye-bye.
Thank you.
All the best.